Federal government seals pact for local solar equipment production.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on the return of democratic rule in Rivers State.
And so the 6-month emergency rule in Rivers State is now over. Outgoing Rivers State Administrator Ibokete Bass just addressed the state, explaining that statecraft is not a destination. He added that Rivers State will continue to require vigilance and leadership.
A situation triggered last March when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu invoked the Section 305.
And this rule led to the suspension of Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, and the State House of Assembly.
Now, this was after a fierce standoff between the executive and the legislature.
It was a dramatic moment that sent ripples through Nigeria's political space.
But the president insisted it wasn't about replacing democracy. It was about restoring peace, order, and governance.
True, and since then, Vice Admiral Ibokete Bass, retired, has been steering the ship of state as sole administrator.
And under his watch, Rivers State's 2025 budget was presented to the National Assembly.
Local government elections were also conducted, and efforts were made to ease tensions and rebuild trust.
He even hosted a public lecture on good governance, calling the emergency a hard but necessary lesson. And
here we are. The emergency rule has expired after yesterday's announcement by the president. There's an interdenominational Thanksgiving planned in Port Harcourt as well.
And all eyes are on Governor Fubara, his deputy, and the State Assembly as they prepare to return to office. Now we have a panel of guests joining us shortly to unpack the return of democratic rule in Rivers State. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I am Juma Yusuf.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and this is Good Morning Nigeria again. I'm Victor Azuchukwu. Okoli Obaja will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, let's get the latest news from Dennis Adegunloye. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Victor and Jume. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. As you've been hearing, President Bola Tinubu has formally ended the state of emergency in Rivers State 6 months after it was imposed to restore peace and order. In a nationwide address, he recalled that on 18th of March 2025, he invoked Section 305 of the Constitution following a total breakdown of governance between Governor Siminalayi Fubara and the State House of Assembly. Rival factions, vandalism of critical economic assets, and an inability to pass a state budget, he said, had paralyzed the government's business despite repeated mediation efforts. Announcing the end of the emergency, he declared that Governor Fubara, Deputy Governor Ngozi Maudu, and members of the State House of Assembly will resume their duties from 18 September 2025. And outgoing River State sole administrator, Vice Admiral Ibokete Bass, just addressed the state, explaining that statecraft is not a destination. He said River State will continue to require vigilance and leadership. Now, United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, has pledged continued support and partnership in actualizing some programs of President Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. Vice President Kashim Shettima described the move as a step in the right direction, noting that the president has redefined the concept of modern leadership in Nigeria. The Vice President stated this when he received a delegation from UNICEF Nigeria, led by the country representative, Wafa Said Abdulatif, on a courtesy visit to the presidential villa. Gombe State has suffered its share of the floods predicted in affected states across the country this year. While on inspection of affected areas in the wake of a heavy downpour in the state capital by a joint team of engineers and environmentalists, the call for communities is to avoid dumping refuse and building houses on waterways. Figures released by health authorities in Sokoto State indicate that cholera has claimed 85 lives within the last 9 months. The disclosure came in the latest updates on the situation, which also highlighted ongoing efforts to contain the outbreak. And with the surge in solar deployments and acceptability, affordability is still a challenge in the country. The federal government is addressing this as a new deal has been signed for local production of solar equipment to cut importation. Saudi Arabian authorities have released 3 Nigerian pilgrims who were detained in Jeddah a month ago following their arrest over alleged drug trafficking. This was confirmed at a press briefing in Abuja. And some news the administrator of the River States, or outgoing administrator of the River States, Rear Admiral Ibokete Ibas, says the mandate given to him has been accomplished. He stated this in a state broadcast to conclude the emergency rule imposed by President Bola Tinubu. The sole administrator said law and order has been restored while local government elections were conducted successfully. He said River State requires vigilance, sacrifice and leadership anchored on truth.
The essence of this season is that the exercise of power without restraint can cripple institutions, and rivalry without dialogue clearly endangers democracy. Let this chapter therefore stand as a permanent reminder that the health of our polity depends not on who wins or loses, but on how political actors manage their differences and on the strength of the institutions we preserve and the unity we nurture.
Outgoing River State Sole Administrator Rear Admiral Ibokete Ibas speaking earlier. That's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues shortly with Jume and Victor after this break. Stay with us.